This week's episode of RBtv is brought to you by RBlibrary.com. Real basic made really simple. So here's the deal. RBlibrary.com features a ton of information from names you can trust. The site has to definitely be one of the most valuable tools in the Real Basic community. They have step-by-step guides and tutorials you can purchase and download right to your desktop. They cover everything from networking to game design to databasing. RBlibrary.com is just fantastic. I can't wait to see what they come out with next. So definitely, guys, go check them out. RBlibrary.com. Stay tuned. Hello and welcome to RBtv episode 4. I'm your host, George Bonish. For those of you who've never tuned in before, RBtv is a video podcast covering some of the latest tips and tricks for the Real Basic development environment. So we're going to start off today's episode with a viewer email. David in Michigan writes, "Hey George, I was wondering if you could do an episode on networking. It'd be great if you could show us how to write an easy to understand networking application. Thanks, David." Well, David, I can definitely show you how to write a simple networking application, and sounds like a great topic for today's episode. So if you have Real Basic installed, go ahead and open it up and let's get started. Alright, so on today's project, what I was thinking we could do was make a simple game and incorporate networking capabilities. So basically we're going to be making a multiplayer tic-tac-toe game, and it's going to be a two-part episode. So we're going to do half of it in today's episode and half of the other half in episode 5. So most of what we're going to be doing today is going to be just writing the logic behind the game, basically, you know, teaching the rules of the game to our program, and then in the next episode we're going to actually be doing most of the networking stuff. So if you're ready to get started, let's go. So the first thing we're going to want to do here is change the name of window 1. I'm going to go ahead and change it to W for window game board. And this window here is going to contain the main tic-tac-toe board and most of the other stuff that we're going to be including in the next episode. So this is going to be basically our main window. So once you've renamed that, let's go ahead and open it up. And the first thing we're going to add here, it's actually a new control or a new object that we've never used before, and it's the line control here. The line control is basically just a graphical line, you know, that you can use for anything on the screen. You can change the angle of it, the width, the size of the border. You can do a lot of stuff to it, but we're going to be using 4 lines that we're going to add right here. They're going to be drawing out our game board. So let's go ahead and double click on this and add one. And you'll notice it adds it at a slant here. Now there's 2 ways to reposition a line and kind of change the angle of it. And you can either drag these disclosure boxes around the corner here, and that gets a bit tricky if you're trying to make vertical line. So I'm actually going to input the numbers manually over here in the property value pane. And I'm going to go ahead and explain to you exactly what the properties are. If you come over here and you look at x1 and x2, now if you imagine a left point and a right point, basically x1 is the x coordinates for the point 1 and x2 are the x coordinates for point 2. So our leftmost side here is going to be point 1 and our rightmost side here is going to be point 2, and then a line is going to get drawn between the 2 points. So here you have y1 and y2, and that's going to be the y coordinates, or the up and down coordinates, for point 1, and then y2 is going to be up and down coordinates for point 2. So basically we're going to be setting x1 and y1 for this corner here, and then x2 and y2 for this corner over here. And I can show you what will happen if I actually grab the corner here and you drag it. You notice the line will move, and if you look over at the property value pane, you can see that the values are changing as I'm moving this. But instead of actually positioning this vertically, I'm just going to go ahead and input the numbers. First thing we're going to want to do is come over here to our border width. Now our border width is basically how thick this line is. We can also change the line color, but I'm just going to keep it at black for this example. So go ahead and select the border width here, and let's go ahead and put in 4 and hit return to set that. And you notice it makes the line a whole lot thicker, which is nice. It's a lot easier to see. Now we're going to set the top of the line here to 12. We can just move it up here, and let's make it a left of about 90. So I'm going to come over here, put in 90, hit enter. So now we have the top point positioned where we want it. Now all we need to do is adjust this bottom point here to come down right below point 1 here. So if we come over here to the x2 property, we can set the x the same as x1, x2 the same as x1, since they're going to be the same distance from the left. So if we set this to 90, and it did, so that's perfect. So now we just need to change y2. That's going to set the basically the up and down distance of this point, this bottom point here. So by increasing y2, we're going to be increasing the length of the line here. And let's go ahead and set y2 at 233. Now I have these numbers written down beforehand to make it a little bit easier for us. So now let's go ahead, we have this line, it looks pretty good. Now you may notice when you click on it, it's not going to get selected. It's a bit tricky, so if you want to select the line in the future, you can click and drag on the background and just highlight a little portion of the line, and you can actually select the line like that. So let's go ahead and select this line here, and let's make a copy of it and paste it, and we have a copy here. Now the second one is going to have the same top. It's going to have a top of 12 again, but we're going to want to move it over to the right a bit, right? So we're going to have two vertical lines here. So let's move it to a left of 166, and by setting this left property here, it changes both x1 and x2 for us. So you see how those both changed. And our y1 and y2 are going to be set the exact same as that, since it's the same length. So we have our two vertical lines set perfectly. Let's go ahead and change the size of our window here. Let's change it. We're going to have it a width of 260. And hit return to set that. We're going to have it a height of 282. Go ahead and hit return. That looks about good. So now let's work on the horizontal line. So go ahead and double click on the line control again. Let's go ahead and change the border back to 4. And let's move it over just a bit here. And we're going to have it at a top of 84. And we're going to have it at a left of 18. Okay, so in order to make this bar horizontal, this line horizontal, we're going to need to line up the y coordinates. So if we come over here to the y, we're going to need to make both of these 84, since we want both points to be 84 pixels from the top of the window. And then in order to expand this to the right, we're going to have to change the x2 value, since that's this point right here. And we're going to go ahead and change the x2 to 239. That should give us a good size. Alright, that's perfect. Now we can go ahead and copy this and paste it. And then let's go ahead and put this also a left of 18. And this one's going to be a top of 160. So it should bring it right down there. So that's perfect. And you see our x coordinates are where they need to be as well. So they're lined up. So let's go ahead and save this. Forgot to save this at the beginning, but we can go ahead and save this now. I'm going to say RBtv episode 4. So now that that's saved, we have a pretty good game board here. Let's go ahead and change the title of the window right there. And come over here to the property value pane and select the title property. And go ahead and change it RBtv episode 4. And again, you can make this whatever you want. And let's go ahead and save those changes. Okay, so now we're going to need to start working on our game squares here. Now, there's a few ways we could have done this. I chose a bit of a more complicated way because it covers a lot of the key programming ideas and techniques. So it may be a little bit complicated, but you're going to be learning a whole lot when you're finished with this. So I'm going to go ahead. Let's switch over to the project tab here. And I'm going to introduce you to a new concept, and that concept is a class. Now you can see we have add class right here. So what a class does basically extends the functionality of existing control. It can extend the functionality. It can do a lot more, but in today's project we're going to be basically extending the functionality of a canvas control. Now we've never used a canvas control, but we're going to be learning a lot about it today. So really, by adding a class and setting it to extend the canvas, we inherit all the canvas's events, but then it allows us to add our own properties and our own methods and you know, anything else that we may want to add. So it's kind of like a custom control. So just come up here and let's go ahead and click this Add Class button there. You'll notice class 1 pops up here. And come over here to the property value pane and let's take a look over here. Let's go ahead and change the name of our class here to GameSquare. Now this class is going to represent, come over here, it's going to represent each one of these. So basically we're going to have 9 GameSquare controls on this window. So switch back to the property tab, or project tab here, and if you notice the super field here, now the super is basically the extends, basically what this class is going to be extending, and in our case we're going to want to set it to canvas. So if you just type in canvas and hit return. Now we could have set this to anything we wanted to, you know, pop-up menu, push button, static text, pretty much anything, but today's project we're going to just be doing canvas. And you notice the icon changed here to a canvas icon, and if we open up GameSquare here under event handlers, we inherit all the events that are associated with the canvas. So we have paint, which is the distinctive event for a canvas, and all the other ones. So you know, we have mouse down, mouse enter, we have open, and you know, all these can be called. But then if you notice here, we can add all these, add method, add property, constant. So it's kind of like we're making a custom canvas, you know, so to say. So let's go ahead and come over to the W game board here, and if you come over to the control pane, click this drop down right up here, you can see we have project controls. And now what project controls are the custom controls that we've made. And if you switch to there, you'll notice we have GameSquare right here, and I can simply click and drag this onto the window and it gets added. So here, if you come over here and look at the property value, it's a GameSquare and it's named as GameSquare1, but when I double click on this, you know, we come into the GameSquare1 control, and you notice we have all these methods here, but anything that we were to add into this tab would get inherited right in here. So it's basically like we're just creating our own special canvas. So let's go ahead and delete this and come back over here and let's open up a GameSquare. We can close that. Alright, so let me explain a little bit about what we're going to be doing with this GameSquare control. It's going to be able to track a few things about itself. We're going to have it track what I'm calling its gender, and by the gender I mean if it's an X or an O or a circle. So basically, you know, what role it plays on the board, and then we're going to have it track if it's been played yet. So if it's already been you know, if the symbol has already been added to it, you know, if there's been an X or an O drawn to it, then we're going to want to set that played flag, you know, to true, so that it can't be played again. And we're going to add those as properties here. So let's go ahead and do that. Let's add one property, and let's set this to gender, and we're going to have that as a string, and we're simply going to be setting that to X or an O. And we can make that a public. Let's go ahead and add another property here. Let's have played as a Boolean, and let's set that as false by default, since they're all going to be set as false. So now we have these two properties, and that's really all we're going to be needing for GameSquare. So you see how it can be useful, because once we have all 9 of these GameSquares on the board, you know, we don't need to track them you know, through properties on this window. They each kind of contain their own values, and they kind of remember, you know, the properties about themselves. So come over here to GameSquare again, and let's go ahead and go to the open event here. And in the open event, we're simply going to be setting default values to these two. So let's go ahead and go to me.gender equals blank. And again, the me handler here just references the object that's that the event is located in. So basically, GameSquare. And then we're going to be doing me.played equals false. and then go ahead and save that. Alright, so now you may be a bit confused as far as this class here, being represented on the game board here, but I can give you an example. If you drag a game square here, and then let's drag another game square here. Now, while these are two completely separate game pieces, this is game square 2 and this is game square 1, they both share any code that's going to be here in the game square class. So if I were to come into here, into the Mousedown event and say message box hello world, and you see this is game square 2 here, but if I were to come up here to game square 1 and go to the Mousedown event, message box hello planet. So now if I were to run this, when I clicked on this one it would say hello planet, but if I clicked on this one it would say hello world. Now if I came over here to game square the class, and let's go to the mouse enter event, and let's do another message box here. I'm just going to give you guys an idea of what I'm dealing with. Say mouse enter. Now if you notice, we still have the hello planet here, we have hello world here, so they still contain their own unique pieces of code, but when I run it, now you're not going to see the canvas control on the window since it's going to be an invisible control, but as soon as I move my mouse up here, you're going to see it's going to say mouse enter, just like that. And if I move it here, it's going to say mouse enter as well. But when I click, it's going to say hello world there. When I click here, it's going to say hello planet. So you can kind of see the differences between the two, but how they kind of inherit the same piece of code. We can go ahead and delete these two here. Let's go ahead and remove this mouse enter code and save those changes. Okay, let's go ahead and come over here to the Mousedown event. So we're going to want to do a few things here in the Mousedown event. Mainly what we're going to want to do is check if the game square that they clicked on has been played already. So basically, if there's already a mark there, we're not going to want anything to happen. We're not going to want it to replace the mark there, and we can reference that by this played boolean here. So that can easily be done using an if statement. We can do if me.played equals false, then we can do something in here and do an end if. Alright, so now let's talk about what we're going to do here in this this block. So basically, if we get into this block, the game square is free. It's able to be manipulated and changed. The first thing we're going to do, let's go ahead and set the me.played to be true, since we're not going to want any more interaction to be happening with this square. So it's going to do me.played equals true. The next thing we're going to do is set this gender here to whatever the user's gender is. So whether they selected X's or O's, we're going to want to set that. Now currently, we don't have a way to track what the user's gender is. So before we do anything else here, let's go ahead and work on another piece of the project. So let's go ahead and switch to the project tab here, and we're going to be adding a module. Now we worked in modules in episode 3, so if you're a bit confused about those, go ahead and go back and take a look at that and see if you can kind of get an understanding of it. So come up here and let's go ahead and click Add Module, and this module we're going to name it Game Logic. And in the Game Logic module here, basically the entire game of tic-tac-toe, we're going to be setting all the rules in here. We're going to be manipulating a lot of the data in here. So let's go ahead and open that up. Let's add a new property. And this property, I'm going to name it the myGender property. And this is going to contain the player's gender. So whatever they have set, whether that be X's or O's, we're going to contain that right here within this string property. And we're not going to set a default since we're going to have the user select what they want. But in this case, let's go ahead and set one just for the testing purposes, and let's go ahead and set that to X, and you can hit return, set that. you notice it got added right here to the properties. So let's go ahead and switch back to game square here. Let's go ahead and say me.gender equals game logic. Now remember, this is referencing this game logic module here, and we can use the dot operator, and then you notice it says my gender. So me.gender equals my gender. So what this is doing is basically assigning this this square to be owned by us, so to be owned by the user. Okay, the next thing we're going to be doing is actually drawing out the user's gender onto the screen. So whether that be an X or an O, we're going to need to draw that onto the canvas. So now let me explain to you a little bit about what a canvas can do. Canvas can display pictures. You can draw pictures. You can draw strings. You can draw pretty much anything you want. Real Basic contains a lot of drawing options there. You can draw lines, circles, different kind of shapes, colors, pretty much anything. But in order to do that, you're going to need to access what's called the graphics class. And each canvas contains the graphics class. And by accessing that, it gives you the ability to draw your string or to draw your line or whatever you want to do. So now let's go ahead and access that. Let's go ahead and type graphics. You know, it automatically completes, and then hit the dot operator. And let me go ahead and hit the tab button here, and I can show you a list of options that the graphics class offers for us. You'll notice we have here draw caution icon, draw line, draw object, draw oval, draw picture. If you come all the way down here, we're going to want the DrawString operator there. So you can go ahead and click on this, and now the DrawString function requires a few parameters, and if you look at the bottom of the screen there, you can see it requires a string, an X integer, a Y integer, and the other two are optional. We're not going to be using those. But what the X and the Y are basically the position on the canvas itself where you want to draw that string to. So if we switch over here to game board, let's go ahead and add a game square to the window here. And we can make it right about this size. Alright, so if our canvas, let's make it 64 by 64. So now our canvas is its own object. So if you imagine the top left point here as 0, 0, we're going to want to bring the insertion point right about here, because when you're drawing a string, the Y position, the up and down position, is the baseline of the string, not the top of the string. So if you set it at 0, it's going to get drawn up to the top here, and you're not going to be able to see it on the canvas. So we're going to want to come right about somewhere right here, you know, in the lower portion of it, and maybe over a little bit, so that it draws right in the center here. So let's switch back to the game logic, or I'm sorry, the game square tab here, and let's go ahead and draw the gender here. So now remember, DrawString will require a string, and gender right here is a string. And then hit a comma, and then let's go ahead and I'd say, since our game square is about 64, I'd say we can do it 10 over and 55 from the top. And let's go ahead and save this, and let's run it. Now whenever I click the square here, an X is going to pop up somewhere maybe around here, and it's going to be fairly small since we haven't changed the size of the text that wants to be drawn. But let's go ahead and click this. You notice an X is drawn right there, and we can keep clicking it, nothing's going to happen, and click anywhere else. But you notice the X is really small, so we're going to want to make it quite a bit bigger here. Let's go ahead and quit this, and let me show you how we're going to change the size. So click right here in the white space and drop down a line or two, and let's access the graphics class again and use the dot operator. Now the graphics class contains a property called text size, and it requires an integer, and we can set that to that. Let's go ahead and set it to a size of 64. So now we're setting the text font size to a size of 64. Let's go ahead and save that and run it, and I'll show you what a difference that made. If you come up here and click this, you notice we have a very large X now. So that looks about good. So let's go ahead and quit this, and let's come over here to W Game Board again. So let's go ahead and copy and paste this and add it to the rest of the board here. Fill in all the 9 spaces there. Let's go ahead and center this up. You notice every time I add one, the name gets incremented by 1 automatically. So we're at game square 4 right now. This should be game square 5. And that's how we're going to be referencing our squares once we start the programming. Almost done here. And let's go ahead and make sure that these line up. There should be a left of 19. This one, it's a left of 18, so let's go ahead and move this over 1. Let's move this over 1. And these should all be lined up. And these, let's go ahead and maybe move this over 1. And let's move this one over 2. And this one maybe up just a bit. Alright, so these look pretty lined up. And we have all 9 of them up there, and you notice they go in order 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 at the end here. And let's go ahead and save that, and let's run it, and I can show you. Now anywhere I click within this board, an X is going to get added in there. Just like that. And that's because each one of these squares inherited this Mousedown event right here. So even though you can't, if we open up any one of these, our Mousedown event actually doesn't show up here, because whenever we change one in the GameSquare class, it actually gets removed here from the actual control on the window. But anything we change in here automatically gets reflected to everything on our game board right here. So let's go ahead and switch over here to the GameSquare class one more time, and we're going to add a new method. And this method is going to be the reset method. And what our reset method is going to do is basically reset all our options to the default value and remove the symbol that was painted or that was drawn onto the canvas or onto the game square. So let's go ahead and add a method here. Let's call it reset. And we're not going to have any parameters or return type. But let's simply type in me.gender equals, open and close that. And then we could say me.played, and since we're going to want to set it at the default, we're going to want it to be false, and that's a boolean, so we can simply set that as false. So now we're going to want to clear out the string that was drawn onto the canvas, and by doing that, we're going to use a function called ClearRect, or ClearRectangle, and that's again part of the graphics class. And so what we can do is we can access the graphics class, and we're going to do a dot operator again, and ClearRect, and the ClearRect requires 4 parameters, and that's going to be the start position, the X and the Y, and then the width and the height of the square that you want to clear out. So basically we're going to want to set it at the width and the height of however big our game square was. So we can simply open this up and do it 0, 0. So we're going to start in the top leftmost corner. Then we can do me.width and me.height. Now by not setting it to a certain value here, if we were to go through the board here and resize this, maybe a little bit bigger, a little bit smaller, we don't have to go back and change this value. It just automatically reads that value right there, so it's pretty simple. And go ahead and save that, and let's come over here to the game board. Now let's add a little button right here. It's going to be a reset button. Let's switch over here back to the built-in controls. Now I'm going to go ahead and let's add a bevel button. Double click that, and let's just maybe drag it right here. And let's come over here to the caption. Let's change the caption, reset, and hit return. So now we have this button created. We're not going to want to actually call reset on each one of these squares from within this reset button. We're going to actually make a new game method here in the game logic module. So let's come over here to our module and let's add a new method. Let's go ahead and name that method new game and hit return. And here within this new game method is where we're actually going to go through and reference each one of those squares. So we're going to go wGameBoard, and it's going to reference that window. We're going to do GameSquare1 dot reset, and by calling this reset function, we're coming into this game square and we're resetting basically everything in here. So now we're going to want to do this for every one of our squares. So you can simply copy and paste this 8 more times and come in here. Let's change these all the way to 9. Okay, so now whenever I call this, new game function or new game method, all the squares right here are going to get reset. So let me go ahead and open up this reset button here, and in the action event, let's go ahead and call game logic, right? Because we're going to access this new game method. So game logic dot new game, and that's simply going to reset everything. So let's go ahead and save this and run that. You notice I can click on all of these, but as soon as I hit reset, everything gets cleared, everything disappears. So we can do that, fill in the whole thing, hit reset, everything gets reset. So let's go ahead and quit this and switch back to the board. And let's go ahead and rename this button to something a bit more proper. Let's say BTN reset, and maybe drop it down just a little bit there. Alright, so that looks pretty good. So the next step in the project is to write what I call an asking method. And what an asking method is basically you call this function when you wanna ask a question about a certain object. So in our case, we're going to be writing a method. I'm going to call it the DoWeOwn method. And each one of these squares here, we're going to need to call a DoWeOwn on. And the reason that we need to ask DoWeOwn it, we need to check if we actually, have a winning combination, a winning row, whether it be up or down or left or right or diagonally. So let's go ahead and come here to the game logic module and add a new method. I'm going to call it DoWeOwn. And parameters, we're going to need a game square, so we're going to be passing in a game square, and let's call it square as game square. So basically now this method requires a square to be passed into it, and then we're going to be returning a boolean. So what we're going to be doing is passing in this game square, checking if we own it, and returning true or false depending on if we do or we don't own it. And to check if we own it, it's going to be really simple. All we're going to do is create an if statement here that says if square dot gender. So if the gender of this square is equal to my gender, which is right here, and this is going to be already set at the beginning of the game to whatever our symbol is going to be, whether it's X's or O's, then return true. Pretty simple. Else, return false. And then go ahead and close that out with an end if. So now this is pretty simple, but it's going to do a lot of work for us. Instead of having to copy this into every square or whatever, we can simply access the data within the square here and see if it's ours or not. So you might be a bit confused about how this is going to play a role in the final project, but the next step here, we're going to be checking actually if the game is over and we have a win or not, and this is where this function is really going to come in handy. So let's go ahead and add a new method. We're going to call this the check win method, and what we're going to be doing in this method is basically checking all the possible combinations of a win, and if we have a win, then we're going to actually end the game and display that we won. But this is basically right here, this method is going to be where most of our work is going to be done. Let's go ahead and create a new variable here, and it's going to be a boolean, and it's going to be we win as boolean. And let's go ahead and set this as false by default. So if this ever gets set to true, we know that the game is over, we've won, right? So now what we're going to have here, we're going to have a whole bunch of if statements basically outlining every possible combination of a win. So if you switch over to the game board here, you can see we can have these three across, we can have these three across, we can have these three across. Now we can have these three down, or these three down, or these three down. And we're going to have this diagonal here, and we can have this diagonal here. And all those combinations constitute a win. So we're going to have to check basically every time the user clicks their mouse on a square, we're going to have to check to see if there's a win. So let's come over to the game logic tab here. And this may seem pretty tedious, but it's basically we're teaching the game of tic-tac-toe to our program here. So now we're going to write a simple if statement that says if, and then here's where our DoWeOwn method comes in. So we're going to say DoWeOwn, and now let's access. This is going to be our first combination. We're going to do. Let's say this is going to be our top row vertical. So, or I'm sorry, top row horizontal. So we're going to be checking this square and this square and this square. What we're going to be doing is saying if there's an X here, or if there's my gender here, my gender here, and my gender here, then it's a win. And by checking the gender, we're doing basically, do we own this, do we own this, and do we own this? If that's true, then hey, we won the game. If it's not, go on and let's check the next one. We're going to check the next one and check all the possible combinations. So if do we own WGameBoard dot GameSquare1, and then now we're going to use something we've never used before. We're going to use AND. So basically, both of these here have to be true in order to get into this if statement. Do we own WGameBoard dot GameSquare2, and another AND, do we own WGameBoard dot GameSquare3. So now if we get in here, we win, right? So let me go over this a little bit. Basically, you know, we're accessing the WGameBoard window here, accessing the GameSquare1 control. So that would be this control right here, GameSquare1. We're passing that to the DoWeOwn function or method here. It's checking. So now this GameSquare1 control here is in the DoWeOwn method, but it's referenced as square since we passed it in as square. So square.gender, if it's equal to my gender, then we own it, so we return true. Otherwise, we return false. So let's come back over here. We win, so we're going to want to set actually here to we win equals true. I'm going to go ahead and add a little comment here so we know exactly where we were, and this is going to be our first row horizontal, right? And probably take this out. Let's go ahead and do else if, and then we can simply copy probably all of this right here, copy that and paste it right in here, and this is, we're going to do second row horizontal, right? So now we're going to want to start with GameSquare4, GameSquare5, and GameSquare6. So we can change these right here. GameSquare4, 5, and 6. And now let's just copy this. And now you notice we're doing an else if. So if this case doesn't come true, then we automatically skip down to the next one. And if this isn't true, we're going to skip down to the next one, and so on and so forth, all the way to the end, till the end if. So let's go ahead and paste this in here. And now we're going to do third row horizontal, which is 7, 8, and 9. So let's change that, 7, 8, and 9. So you can see how handy that DoWeOwn function came in, because all we have to do is copy that line and change basically 3 strings here, and we have you know, we have a whole new set of functionality. Third row. Right, so we're done with all the horizontal, right? So now we're going to want to switch over to the vertical. So let's do first row vertical, and that's going to be 1, 4, and 7. So let's change this, 1, 4, and 7. And let's copy this one, paste that, and now we're going to do second row vertical, 2, 5, 8. Let's go ahead and change this, second row vertical, 2, 5, and 8. Alright? Okay, and finally, well, not finally, third row vertical, 3, 6, and 9. Over here, third row, and 3, 6, and 9. Alright, so now we only have 2 more to go. Those are going to be our diagonals here, right? It's going to be 1, 5, and 9. Okay? So 1 is already there, 5, and 9, and this is going to be our let's see, left to right diagonal. Copy that. And our final one is going to be 3, 5, and 7. 3, 5, and 7. This is going to be right to left diagonal. And finally close this out. So with an end if. Alright, so wow, looks like a lot, right? But actually not that much is going on. We're just simply checking every single possible combination of a win. And if we, if every one comes true, so let's say, this case is true right here. We have, we do own game square 1, and we do own square 2, and we own 3. Now all 3 of these have to be true in order to get this to happen, right? So if this, if one of these isn't true, we're going to skip to the next one. But let's say, they're all 3 true, then we win is set to true, and all these are skipped, and we come out to the end if here. Alright, so now you may be asking yourself, alright, so we wrote all this, we figured out who won, if the game is over or not, but how are we going to actually reference that with the program? So now we simply have to come down here, and now here's where the we win boolean comes in. Write another if statement, and we can say if we win, then, and now you notice I didn't put here equals true. Now I don't have to do that. By saying if we win, basically it's saying if we win is equal to true. And we're going to create a couple new things here. We're going to create a new property. We're going to call it the game on property. Alright, so let's go ahead and click add property, and let's change that to game on, and we'll make that a boolean, and let's make this true by default, right? And hit enter. Let's switch over to check win here, and so now if we win, we want to end the game, right? So let's change game on equal to false. And game on right now is not doing anything, it's just a property, but later on we're gonna actually add a couple things to the game square class here that are going to use this game on boolean. And the next thing we're going to want to do is create a new method. We're going to call it the game over method. Let's go ahead and add a method here. And in here we're simply going to be referencing some static text that we're going to be creating. We don't need to do it right now, so let's just go ahead and switch over to the check win thing here, and let's go ahead and call game over. And we can end this statement. So we get to the end of this, and if we won, then set game on to false, so basically end the game and then run the game over method. So whatever is in game over, go ahead and run that. So go ahead and switch over here to WGameBoard, and let's go ahead and create a little static text control right here. It's going to be kind of like our status. We're going to create any messages that we want to be displayed here. So go ahead and find the static text control here, double click on that, and let's go ahead and drag that right here, maybe line it up right about there, and we can maybe resize it. That's about good. Now let's not have any text displayed here by default, so if we come over here to the text and simply delete this, you notice that the text disappeared from here, and when I deselect it you can't see anything, but the static text object is still there. So let's name this to st game status and hit return. So now we have the static text object. So let's go ahead and come over here to the game logic tab and switch over to the game over method. And for the game over, we're simply going to want to say WGameBoard dot stGameStatus dot text equals, I'm going to say you win. Alright, now you may be wondering why every case has been that we win. There's never kind of a you lose situation, but that's going to get handled later on in the networking part. We're simply going to want to get kind of the game logic working in this episode. So we're not actually getting a full functioning game today. We're simply going to be checking for wins and whatnot. So let's go ahead and save this. Switch over to game board here, and now whenever a win is detected, the static text here should automatically get updated to say you win. And let's go ahead and select this, and let's go ahead and make this bold just to kind of emphasize that a bit. And you don't see any changes here, but whenever text gets displayed, it's going to be bolded. And go ahead and save that. So now we've added a couple of things. We're going to need to actually come back over here to our game logic and our new game method, and add a couple more things right in here. Let's go ahead and come to the bottom of this list, and let's go ahead and reset this static text object here we just created back to null, or back to nothing. You know, in case the text "you win" was written there, we're going to want to go ahead and reset that back to blank. So if you go to gameboard.stGameStatus.text and set that equal to open quotes and then close quotes, and then we're going to want to set our game on property here back to true, since you know, when we're creating a new game, we're going to want that to be set to true. So equal that true. So now we never actually use this game on property anywhere. So let's go ahead and switch over to the game square here, and let's change over to the Mousedown event. We're going to add another condition onto this if statement here. Let's go ahead and add some parentheses around this, just kind of separate them out. Let's go ahead and add an opening and closing, and then let's do an and there, and then here's where that game on property comes in. Now we got to reference that. Let's go ahead and put open parentheses here, reference the game logic module again, and then dot game on. So now if you remember what this mouse down function did, or method did, it checks if the square has already been written to, so if there's already a symbol on there, and now it's also checking if the game is actually even being played. And if it's not, if the game is not, you know, currently being played, and there's nothing written in the square, then we're not going to be able to run any of this code. So this is good. Basically now we can turn the game on and off for the user. Now let's come to the end of this right here and add a couple spaces. Now let me walk you through a little bit of the logic here of what's going to go on in this if statement. You know, we do this check up top here. If there's nothing displayed there and the game is going on, we're going to go ahead and set it to being played, so it can't be played anymore. We set its gender to my gender, you know, so whether the user is an X or an O, let's say they're an X, so this gets set to an X. Then we draw that X out to the screen, right? The gender is a string, so we draw it out to the canvas. And now the next thing we're going to want to do is, as soon as the user clicks that button, we're going to want to check, you know, if that newly activated button is a win. So if it actually activated a win. So by doing that, we can simply call game logic dot check win, and again you can see how methods and modules come in handy. We can just simply call them from anywhere. And so now whenever I come over here and I click this, let's say this square here, it'll run in here to the game logic tab, go into check win, you know, and do all this, check every one of our combinations. One thing I do notice that I forgot to do, at the end of all these if statements, we forgot to put the then operator. So we can simply come in here, put in then, just copy that, paste that into every one of these here, and we can go ahead and save this. So now we get into here, you know, check all the combinations. If it's true, we run game over, and everything should be working fine. So let's go ahead and test this out. So now when I click on this, you remember all those different things that are going to run. So now next is displayed. We ran the check win method in the game logic module, and obviously we don't have a win because none of the other squares you know, have any X's in them. But if we click here, and then finally, as soon as I click here, we should run that check win method again, and we should have a win. And lo and behold, you win. Alright, great. But now let's reset the board. Everything gets erased, this gets reset. And now let's try we're going to still put 3 X's in there, but let's make a non-winning combination. So let's do one here, and one here. So obviously that's not a win, right? But it still sees 3 X's in here. I could put one here, still not a win. I could put one, let's see, here, and it's still not a win. But as soon as I do this, we should have 3 diagonal, right? Yep, and we win. So we can reset this, and everything goes back to the original state. So let's quit this and return to our W game board here. So we covered a few new things in today's episode. It wasn't really that much, but it's kind of our building blocks here, are our foundation for episode 5, and that's going to be actually starting our networking for this program. And we're going to be actually dealing with some sockets, a lot of new ideas, and it's going to be actually a pretty cool program. You'll be able to, you know, play tic-tac-toe with your friends. What's better than that? So on that note, I think that'll be the end of episode 4. Thank you very much for watching. For RBtv, I'm your host, George Bonus. Stay tuned.